Okay, so we're going to start with a short meditation to settle in, and then I'm going to offer you guys a little instruction, and we'll dive into a longer practice. So continuing to settle in as you're already so beautifully doing. Bring a little attention to the area around the eyes, and see if you can invite a little more softening. The eyes and the eyebrows, space between the eyebrows. And bringing some attention down into the jaw and inviting the jaw to soften and release. Mouth relaxing, the tongue relaxing inside of the mouth. Maybe allowing the mouth to drop open just a little. And bringing some attention down to the neck and the shoulders. Inviting the neck and the shoulders to start to relax and really feeling this relaxation. Noticing the sensation of relaxation. What does that feel like for you? Relaxing down both of your arms and into your hands. Bringing some attention to the chest and the stomach. Softening and relaxing the torso, and coming around to the back as well. Just relaxing any muscles you don't need for sitting. Continuing down into the hips and the seat and the pelvic area. Inviting all the muscles of the pelvic area to release. Relaxing around the tailbone. Inviting this relaxation to continue to move down your legs. Muscles of the thighs and the calves relaxing and releasing. And relaxing into the feet. And we're going to take a moment here to practice a really important technique that both Chris and I probably offer at every class, which is resource. Finding a place in the body that feels okay or feels even good or pleasurable. And resource can also be external, but for the purposes of what we're doing today, let's work with something internal. Let's work with a physical sensation in the body that feels good. Now this can be something as simple as your hands or your feet. Oftentimes people find that's a good spot to focus on, where there's not a lot of emotion, and it tends to have a little bit of a pleasant vibration. But there might be somewhere else in your body that feels even better. You might have a lot of relaxation somewhere, or some waves of pleasure somewhere in the body. So take a scan through your body and decide what you want to focus on for right now. And you can always switch it up. But just for the next couple moments here, choose a spot that you can focus on as resource. And rest your attention there. Anytime you're pulled away into something else, a thought, an uncomfortable sensation, gently bring your attention back to this resource, this place of pleasure, relaxation, or at least neutrality in the body. Maybe there's a sense of safety, a sense of peace or calm in this part of the body. Just dropping an anchor there and hanging out with that resource that you have within you. Coming back one more time to this resource. And then as you're ready, starting to blink the eyes open, just taking in the light of the room. Taking a moment to gently transition. All right. Hi. Hello. So, what I want to work with a bit over probably over the next month or so is working with this focus on self technique, the practice of deconstructing self into strands of experience instead of this tangled up knot that most of us are walking around in most of the time. And so some of you have practiced this with me or with Chris. For some of you it's new. But I want to break it down into a couple different pieces. And so today we're going to start with just working with the mind. So just working with mental talk. So thinking comes in two ways. It comes in images and it comes in auditory thinking. And so for the purposes of what we do today, we're just going to be focusing on the auditory thinking. That doesn't mean you have to turn off the visual thinking or anything else. But we're going to focus our attention on the auditory thinking. And so that could be anything from replaying a conversation you had earlier, narrating your meditation, criticizing your meditation, naming the things you're going to do this week or the stuff you have to get done. Could just be random mental activity. It doesn't even necessarily make sense. It seems apropos of nothing. So it really doesn't matter what it is for this technique, for the way that we're going to work with it today. It doesn't matter if it's super profound, like your best idea ever, or completely boring, mundane, just like thought that means nothing to you. We're going to put it all in the same category, which is just talk. We'll just call it talk. It could be that it's sounds inside your mind. It may not be actual words, but any kind of thinking that's auditory, we're just going to call it talk. So the way that we focus on this is the same way that you might focus on your breath or anything else, any other object of focus. We're just going to turn that attention towards the mind and towards auditory thinking. And so we're never trying to turn these thoughts off. We're never trying to quiet them. We're never trying to change them in this technique anyway. We're really just observing and witnessing what's there. We're witnessing this activity of the mind. So one of the things that can happen as we're focused on the mind is we get caught in the mind. We get pulled into it and we take it really personally. And that's one of the whole points of this practice, is to learn to not take it so personally and maybe not to get so pulled into it. We're walking around in the world, in our life, our entire reality is constructed by our mind. What we like, what we don't like. I mean, today I had some things I enjoyed, I had some things I didn't enjoy so much, but really the only difference between enjoying or not enjoying was just what I was thinking about it. Like, I had to go to a doctor, and I enjoyed where I went because I knew that they were quality. I didn't enjoy the copay, right? And so I had these two different mental experiences, and then my body reacted to them, right? I pull up and I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good one. I really like this one, and they're nice and they're very professional and there's parking, blah blah blah, right? And so it's like the body's like feeling light, feeling easy, feeling good, and then I get in there, and I knew the copay, but I sort of convinced myself that my insurance was right, that they knew what was true, which is not the case. I knew how much the copay would be, but I convinced myself of another number. And so I went, again, mind, right? So I went in there and I go up and get my insurance card, and they tell me what the copay would be. And then my mind is like, oh, that's $45 more than what you thought it was going to be. And then my body starts feeling kind of heavy, right? And so I'm like, and then my mind's like, well, maybe you should call another one and just like make sure that there's not. And then it's like, thanks, mind. Thanks for coming online and trying to figure this out for me. You don't need to. It's cool. Like we got it. I'm gonna see the doctor. It's gonna be okay. And then my body was, pretty neutral again. I go to the grocery store and, I'm picking up something that I'm really excited about eating. My body's feeling good. My mind's saying, this is going to taste good. Then I'm getting the thing that I'm not as excited about, that I'm like, I've eaten this a lot, I don't want to eat this anymore, but I don't have a lot of options because my diet's really restricted, right? That's the mind. The body starts to feel heavy, right? And these are just two instances, right? It's all day. This is how we live. Our mind is constructing our reality. And then we're having feelings based on what our mind has to say, based on the reality that we're constructing. And so I've practiced with my mind for many years, but that doesn't mean that I'm immune to the mind. It doesn't mean that the mind isn't still there doing its thing, because I live in the world, right? Like if I lived in a monastery or in like maybe a really sleepy town where like I just kind of meditated a lot and like, I don't know. I can't imagine my life being too sleepy anywhere I was, but let's just say, something like that. The mind will settle down because there's just not as much stimuli. But here we are in Los Angeles, and it's like The Walking Dead minus the zombies out there. It's like crazy. It's just the air alone is intense, and there's just a lot going on. Just getting in your car and driving around is a huge amount of stimuli. So it doesn't really matter, how practiced you are at this technique. The mind is still going to come online. The difference is, do you believe it and do you get pulled in by it? Does it run the show 100% of the time? And for me, it doesn't, because I've practiced with it a lot, right? And that's all that it is. It's practice. And just like learning to play the piano, just like learning a language, the more you practice something, the stronger your skill gets, the easier, the more effortless it is. And then maybe more material arises. Maybe you get really sick, or maybe there's a death in your family, or maybe you lose a job or you get a job. Maybe something really great happens. The mind is going to kind of take that new material and start crunching it, start working with it. And so then you get to put your practice right back. You get to come right back to your practice. So it's ongoing. There's not, I don't really think of a graduation date. If what you're looking for is to have almost no thought, you can attain that through certain practices and through certain environments. That's possible. It's not my goal. But if it is your goal, you can do it. But you're still going to have there's still going to be a self there. No matter how awake you are, the self arises, because that's, it's what we are. We're humans. And we can get really refined. We can refine the hell out of a human, but we're still human as long as we're here in this body, in this realm or whatever. So learning to observe and work with the mind is a really powerful thing to do, because it changes your experience of being human. It takes you from being a human who's like in the Matrix, plugged in and naked in one of those pods, to a human that is actually aware and awake and can fight the aliens. And the aliens in my analogy is it's like suffering, right? It's suffering. It's unconsciousness. And when we work with techniques like this, we start to learn to wake up. We start to learn to rewire our experience of what it is to be human, so that we really don't have to suffer so much. Doesn't mean we never suffer. I mean, in Buddhism, they talk about the end of suffering, total cessation of suffering. And I haven't had that experience. I don't know anybody who has. And that includes really, big, super awake, accomplished, famous teachers. I've seen them suffer firsthand. So creating a new relationship with suffering will greatly reduce it, and then give you all the tools that you need when there is some suffering that comes up. So for this technique, we're going to bring attention to the place where mental talk arises, which is in here. But actually, before we go on, any questions about anything I've said so far? I know I haven't totally explained the technique yet, but any questions just about or thoughts about what I've said so far?
This will be good. I usually do image and feeling and motion, because I don't tend to be very active internally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I identify a whole lot, unless I'm really worked up over something. So maybe stuff's there. It's just not as pronounced for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, kind of maybe like a needle in the haystack kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so not everybody is going to be aware of mental talk. Sometimes it's when we're sitting in a room doing nothing, just sitting there, there's just not a lot going on. For some of us, there's nonstop going on, but for some of us, there won't be that much. For some of us, there'll be more visuals. For some of us, there'll be more motion in the body. And that's fine. For the purposes of what we're doing today, you're not going to create anything. You're just going to observe what's there. So if there's nothing there, you may notice the mind say, oh, there's nothing there, right? And so that's going to be mental talk. You can focus on that. But if there's really nothing there and there's quiet in that part of mental experience, then just hang out with it. Just be with the quiet. Be with the quiet in the mind. Many people will go and do years and years of meditation to try to have that experience, to sit down and have no thoughts. And so, I say it's neither here nor there, but if that's your experience, there's some people who'd really like, really might like to trade with you. So either there's mental talk or there's not. And so if there is, then you can acknowledge it as talk. And if there's not, then you can acknowledge it as quiet in your mind, just spaciousness in the mind. And the cool thing about observing that quiet spaciousness is that when some talk arises, it's really obvious, because it's like the ripples go out. And so, yeah, take it easy rather than thinking of it like a needle in a haystack. Think of it like a stone that gets dropped in really still water. That'll be really noticeable, actually. Anything else? Questions or thoughts about anything I've said or anything about this technique so far? Okay. So we're going to put attention in the area where mental talk arises. And for most people, that's somewhere around here. But it can be other places too. I've been sitting in meditation and heard it come from the other room. I've heard it come from my stomach or my feet, right? It can come from anywhere. For the most part, this is where I observe it, and this is where most people observe it. And so to begin, that's where we'll put our attention. We'll put our attention in the sort of area towards the back of the head between the ears. And just like you could focus your attention on a candle or on your breath or on a mantra or on anything else, you're just going to focus your attention in that area. And once you notice some mental talk arising, I just want you to listen to it. Not so much the content, right? You might be really aware of the content. It might be crystal clear. You might understand every word, or it might be really sort of here and there, wispy, little chunk of thought here, chunk of thought there. You're not really totally sure. Either one's fine. When I say listen, I want you to listen to the activity. I want you to listen to the arising and the passing, to the bubbling up, to the vanishing. I want you to listen to the pitch and the pace and the volume, the texture of the mental talk. Like you could listen to music, instrumental music, and just listen, letting go of your ideas about it. I just want you to listen to that activity. And if there's no activity, then listen to that quiet. And for most people, at some point you'll get pulled into it, and you'll be just kind of caught in thinking, and that's okay. That's just part of the deal. And so don't judge that as a problem or something you're doing wrong. Instead, just recognize, okay, so I was caught in the thought, and I've just woken up. It's a little mini awakening. Woke up. I was unconscious, now I'm conscious. I didn't know I was thinking, now I know I'm thinking. And so we just keep doing that again and again and again. It's a practice, right? So each time you have one of those little awakenings and you recognize that you've been pulled into thought in an unconscious way, it's really an opportunity for a celebration. It's an opportunity for congratulating yourself. Now we won't go too far with that, but it's the opposite of judgment is my point. It's the opposite of, oh man, I'm doing this wrong. And if you find yourself in, oh man, I'm doing this wrong, well great, just observe that. Observe that thinking. What can often happen when you're first learning to work with this technique is as soon as you shine the light of awareness on mental talk, it all goes quiet. And so if that happens for you, it's very normal, happens to a lot of people. I always talk about it like, it's like the apartments I lived in when I was a kid after my parents split up, where you came in, you turn on the light, and then all the roaches scurried. That's what it's like. You turn on that light and it's like whoosh. But they'll come back. I mean, I swear I have memories of like making friends with some of those roaches. Like they're like my buddies, and there was this little roach family. I don't know if that was a dream or if that was real, but it feels real. So your thoughts will come back, just like my little roach buddies, and you'll just get to know them. Make friends with that activity. If you find yourself getting really involved with thinking though, like, oh, this is the thought. This is the spiritual thought. This is the one that's going to take me straight to enlightenment, or this is the one that's going to open up all of my wounds and heal me. Just for the purposes of this technique, let's just not go down that path. That's a perfectly wonderful technique to kind of do inquiry with our mental talk, but it's just not what we're doing today. Fair enough? Cool. So just observe in a neutral, impersonal way, but still with a curious attitude, curiosity and acceptance. Just keep greeting the activity of the mind with curiosity and acceptance. All right. Does anybody need any extra pillows, cushions, blankets, anything? You guys are all good. All right, cool. So let's do this. Let's dive in. You can start to settle into your posture. Ideally, the back is nice and long, but still relaxed. We're not straining. We don't want to strain in any way if possible. We want to be as easy and effortless in the body, in the mind, in all ways. Just using the effort that's required. And that might change moment to moment. So once again, just scanning through the body and relaxing from the head to the toes. Maybe paying particular attention to the eyes, jaw, shoulders, stomach, pelvic area, seat, or anywhere else where you might be holding tension or stress in your body. And I just want to remind folks of a resource. So if at any time you're focusing on mind, observing mental talk, and you feel overwhelmed, maybe the talk is particularly negative, or maybe you're just feeling frustrated or fatigued in some way, you can always shift your attention to something that feels good in the body, some sort of resource in the body. And that tool is there for you anytime throughout the practice and anytime throughout life. It's a really powerful thing to do, to notice that you're overwhelmed in some way and be willing to bring attention to something that's not so overwhelming. Being willing to resource, to ground, calm down, wind down. So that's there for you anytime. You use it as needed. So now let's start to draw attention to the area where mental talk arises for you. Place your attention here and start to observe any auditory thinking. And you have an option here. If you'd like, you can label the auditory thinking as talk. Now, that label itself is auditory thinking. So if that just complicates things more, then don't use it. But if it feels like maybe it facilitates mindfulness for you, then go ahead and use it. And you might play around and see what it's like to use the label versus not use the label. Now, if you're trying out the label, you're going to use it every 4 or 5 seconds in a nice neutral tone. It's not a command. It's just an acknowledgement. You're just acknowledging that there is mental activity occurring. And if there's quiet, you can just be with that quiet, or if you want, you can label that. You can label that quiet. Again, that might disrupt the quiet a bit. It's really entirely up to you, the way that you'd like to work. So you have the option of talk and quiet, or you have the option of just acknowledging without the label. And if you are aware of mental quiet, I suggest you really drop into it and experience that. What is that like? of a quiet mind. To the best of your ability, draw your attention towards mental activity that is auditory or the lack of auditory thinking, rather than any images or sensations. This might feel hard at first, and that's okay. Just like learning a language can be hard, or learning an instrument can be hard. If this is a new practice, it might be hard. Keep coming back to witnessing this auditory thinking or the quiet. Depending on if you've worked with this technique before or how easy it comes to you, you may be just catching the tail end of a thought here or there. That's fine. Or you may be able to observe the whole birth and death of a thought. Anywhere in that spectrum you land is a-okay. But if you find that it's easy for you, then maybe lean in a bit more. Can you get even more clear, even more awake around the process of thinking? Just moving to that point where there's just the minimal effort being used, not beyond it. Eventually, it's possible to listen to this thinking like it's somebody else talking, or even several somebody else's. Lots of different layers in there. This takes practice, and so we're practicing. We're not perfecting, we're practicing, so let go of trying to get it right, and instead just see if you can bring a little more curiosity and a little more acceptance into this process of thinking, into this activity of the mind. If you're having trouble separating the images from the words, the visual from the auditory, it can sometimes be helpful to just shift your attention back towards the back of your head, away from the eyes. And let whatever's happening visually just play in the background. And maybe even think less about trying to pry these strands of experience apart, and instead think of it more like noticing one color in a painting or one instrument in a song. Doesn't mean the rest of the painting or song disappears. You're just limiting your attention to one aspect of it. So remember, we're not sitting here just thinking. We're sitting here and witnessing, observing, deconstructing thinking. And in doing this, we can start to recognize that we are not our thoughts. If you can witness your thoughts, then you're not your thoughts. And that's one part of experience, one part of what creates a you. But if it's possible to witness the mind in this way, even if it's just a little bit here and there, it gives you a glimpse into a much, much bigger reality than what's available in thought. Starts to give you some freedom from the things your mind tells you about yourself and other people, things your mind tells you about your life, the things your mind tells you about the world. Start to recognize that all of your opinions and ideas and preferences, all of the things that you think of as you, are made up of this impermanent phenomena, coming and going. And I don't want you to observe this thinking like leaves on a stream or clouds in the sky. I want you to observe it as the activity of your mind. This is your mind. This is auditory thinking. This is what's running the show for most people most of the time. And you are now getting a bird's eye view. You're getting a new perspective on this activity. So get curious, be an investigator, be a spelunker in the mind. Be a scientist. Get really curious. But right along with that curiosity brings so much acceptance. And perhaps layer in some kindness. Can this curious, accepting attention also be kind? That doesn't mean changing the thoughts, but can you greet them with a sort of unconditional sense of kindness? And what that will do is that will start to give even a little more space, a little more perspective. Keep coming back to witnessing the mind, observing auditory thinking, or just hanging out with quiet if there's quiet in the mind. Curious, accepting, kind attention. Don't feel like you need to hold on to the thinking or corral it in any way. Let it move however it wants and just observe that activity. Each time you find yourself tangled up in those thoughts, just gently untangle without any judgment. Come back to observing, to witnessing. Letting go of taking the thinking so personally. Releasing identification with this activity of the mind. And now let's come back to some relaxation to close things out. So bringing some attention to the forehead and the eyes, inviting this part of the face to relax and release. Relaxing all those little muscles around your eyes. And coming around to the temples and the scalp, the whole head, just really give it a little dose of relaxation. Moving down to the jaw, inviting a softening in the mouth and the jaw, letting the mouth drop open a little. Bringing some attention to the neck and the shoulders and inviting relaxation here, softening, letting those shoulders drop down and back, the neck long and relaxed. Bring attention to the arms, inviting the muscles of the arms and the hands to relax. Relaxing into the chest. Feeling the release that comes with each exhale. Moving down to the stomach, relaxing the entire abdomen. Relaxing deep into the gut. Coming around to the back, relaxing the muscles of the upper back. Mid-back and lower back. And just using the muscles you need for sitting up. Inviting everything else to soften. Moving down to the hips and the seat and the pelvic area. Relaxing and releasing here. And relaxing down both of your legs, the thighs, the calves, releasing. Relaxing all the way into your feet. Good, and now taking your time, starting to blink the eyes open, letting in some of the light of the room, transitioning out of the formal practice. So at one point during the meditation, I said, don't think of this like leaves on a stream or clouds in the sky, but instead as your mind. And that's because I want us to get as sort of pure as we can with this, so we can get as clear as we can with this. We're not trying to bypass the mind with this technique. We're not trying to quiet the mind. We're not necessarily trying to have a peaceful experience. If we do, cool. If you don't, cool. We're really working to understand the activity, to perceive it not as what we are, but as an activity that's coming and going, that's totally impermanent. And so while that's a perfectly fine meditation to observe the thoughts like clouds or leaves, it's just not what this is. Because of that, it can be kind of strong medicine. And when you first start working with it, one of the number one things most people notice is that, wow, there's a lot of negative thinking, a lot of judgmental thinking, even like violent thinking, thinking that you're like, where the heck did that come from? I didn't think I was that sort of person. And you're not. You know, they're thoughts. And there's all kinds of stuff in our subconscious. You know, I don't know why I'm talking so much about, I'm not a Buddhist teacher. I don't know why I keep bringing up Buddhism tonight, but sometimes I just do. So, you know, Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and saw demons and, you know, hordes of demons and devils and stuff right before he woke up. And my interpretation of that is he was observing the mind. I've had the experience of demons and devils, and they seemed very real, and there were no drugs involved. I knew, a small percentage of me knew that they weren't real, but I could smell them and see them and feel them. Because I learned to work with the mind this way, I just recognized that as subconscious material that was releasing. It was coming up and moving through, right? So some of this stuff can be kind of scary, and some of it can be really interesting and even kind of like trippy and cool and blissful. And there are a lot of different traditions to explore a lot of different parts of consciousness. With this technique, all we're doing is just observing the activity. And so it doesn't matter what you're thinking. So some of the experiences, like the weird visionary or like hallucinogenic experiences I had through meditation, I like took the trip, you know, I like went on the ride, or I brought inquiry in, and I worked with it, you know, in some other sort of spiritual way, you know, different spiritual practice. But a majority of the experiences I had early on, I was primarily using techniques like this that were very dry meat and potatoes, just like that is mental talk. Yes, I'm hearing a language in my voice I don't know. Yes, I'm hearing like 10 different people talking, and I can hear them all distinctly, and I can like move around and listen to each one, and there's a little old lady, and there's a little boy, and there's, right? Like, it was weird and trippy, but I was just observing it as mental activity. And in doing that, I created a really different relationship with my mind. And that's why I'm passionate about teaching this. Now, that's not to say that I didn't also have really transformative experiences through working with this phenomenon in other ways. And I'm not discounting those ways, and sometimes I teach those ways. But I've been feeling like what I'd like to focus on for the coming month or so is really getting these techniques a little more fine-tuned for folks. Because it really is a wonderful foundation to have for any other work you're going to do, including any sort of trippy shamanic or deity or whatever you're going to do. If you have this foundation of being able to observe just the mind as the mind, then you can go through anything. And you can make choices. You can choose, I'm going to work with this phenomena this way now. Because I recognize that it's my mind, but I'm going to get creative, and I'm going to do, I'm going to play around with, some sort of psycho-spiritual consciousness adventure. but it's very, very helpful to have this foundation. And so for those of you that are going to come back next week, or those of you that are going to join again online, work with this technique a little bit this week, unless we've already talked about you doing something different, in which case, maybe focus on that. But you could put a little bit of time into just playing around with this technique once a day, spending 10 minutes, and just see what comes up in the next week. 1 week of doing something 10 minutes a day every day will start to create a new experience, and then we can talk about it when we come back together again. So, questions, reports, thoughts on what we did, or anything else going on with your practice, or anything else going on that you want to dialogue with me about? Now is the time.
A couple of things I noticed. Something that you said ended up being retrospectively almost seeming like a warning, because you said, I generally have visual and kinesthetic thoughts, and I don't have a lot of mental talk. And my reaction at the time was, well, my mental talk is absolutely relentless, and I'm kind of on the opposite end of that. But when I was doing this practice, I noticed that the thoughts that I have that normally take an auditory form were translating themselves into visuals. Like, I'm going to trick this guy and manifest as a visual to be confusing in this context, which was really interesting. Also, when we were talking on the way in, I mentioned that I'm working on a writing project right now that's been really difficult, and I've been wrestling with it for the last few days. I dreamed about it last night. I worked on it all day today, and I haven't made the kind of progress that I need to make. So part of my mission of coming in here was, well, since I've been completely obsessed with this thing for the last 48 hours and haven't accomplished anything, I'm going to try not thinking about it for the next hour and a half. And that was brutally difficult. It was really, like, if there's when I get into those kind of fixated ruts, this kind of work is really difficult. So normally I have the opposite problem, where I'm kind of all over the place, and it's really good. Doing this kind of work is really good for kind of bringing me down, but I haven't really had the experience of doing it when I was obsessed with something, and that was really interesting.
Yeah. So tell me more about what that was like. I hear that it was hard.
Yeah.
Did you have any moments of the light shining through and it feeling not so hard?
Sure. Lots of them. I mean, I always caught what was going on. But,
excellent.
I also, the way it felt was that my mind was using all kinds of tricks to try to get me to come back in and play with this stuff. I'll do, I had panic about how it's going to be terrible and everyone's going to hate it. And I thought, well, hey, check this out. I just had a really good idea for this. Want to come in here and work on it? No, I can't do that right now. And it was just weird how many different strategies it was using to try to get me back into that space that I was trying to get out of.
Yeah. But that awareness of what the mind was doing is really good. That's a lot of clarity. You were observing the mind. You were witnessing what the mind was doing, right? And it kind of got a little bit of it got to have a little bit of a character in this sort of like trickster, like contrarian, but that's the work, right? And so it's really, in some ways, it's the best time to do this practice when you have something like that going on, because you're going to get the most bang for your buck. It's like getting a really good workout, and so while it's hard, it will strengthen that skill even more. And I would definitely recommend that you I've been having clients microdose lately, and not drugs, but meditation. So like microdosing, microdosing the focus on mind, microdosing talk throughout your day. You know, little moments of just like check in, observe, and then go back to whatever you're doing. Go back into the mind, whatever. But take those little mini doses of like consciousness, awareness. Like, oh, this is the mind. This is what the mind's doing.
This is what's going on.
Yeah.
I remember this from that practice that I was doing.
Right. Right. Oh, from the one that we talked about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the other thing you're pointing at here is that the mind is also a wonderful tool, right? And so while in this technique, doing this practice for this 30-minute practice, you weren't going to go into those ideas that the mind was giving you, but you can start to, you see that difference, right? Like there's the mind just going blah, 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 and then there's like actual ideas and creativity that you can go in and utilize, right? And so the more that we learn to work with the mind this way, the more we can use the mind like a tool rather than have the mind just pull us around. You know, it's like the dog walking the person instead of the person walking the dog kind of thing. And so for creative stuff, it's or really, I mean, everything's creative. You know, it doesn't really matter if you're being creative at like, you know, accounting or being creative for a writing project. Like the mind is a beautiful machine, a wonderful tool, and if we get clear on how to use it and which parts of it are functional, like in the moment, then we become super sharp. Yeah, can really bring that into whatever aspects of life we want to. I'm glad you came, even though you were like super focused on a project. I know it can be hard to peel away.
Yeah, I just thought I had the idea that I really need to spend like every single second that I have working on this, but when I examined that, it seemed kind of ridiculous. I thought, like, I'm not making any progress. I'll try doing the opposite of what seems like a good idea and just see what happens.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah. I know for me, when I was writing my book, I I would do like 4-hour chunks. So I would say, you know, I'm going to write from this time to this time. And what I would do is I would sit down and I'd set a timer for, I'd put everything on airplane mode. I'd set a timer for 50 minutes. I'd sit at my laptop or my computer for 50 minutes, whether I was writing or not. And then when the timer went off, I could do whatever I wanted. I could do a headstand, I could go on social media, I could have a snack, you know, and then I would come back after that 10 minutes and do another 50, and I did that 4 times. And that's the best writing I did in my book. I did like that, you know, because that way it wasn't like, when I was done that 4-hour chunk or whatever hour chunk I decided on, I was done for the day, right? Like, unless I had some like amazing idea that I wanted to go write down, but otherwise, like I didn't need to be thinking about it, which then helped my mind be fresh to come and do it again the next day, you know. Because the mind gets, you get fatigued, right? Creative thinking needs that space, which clearly you know, because you came here. What else? Anything else?
That was really good. I really attempted to focus on the auditory aspect of thought. And I can sort of see thought as sort of, like you were saying, mutable between the 3: emotion, talk, and image. But just because of the way I'm sort of put together at the moment, or it's usually more image and feeling. But so it was that way too. So, but it turned out to be very relaxing that way, because like I wasn't trying to create any thought, but just kind of I wasn't noting much anyway. The other two. Mm-hmm. So, which is kind of like a whole lot of silence and it just relaxing. It was kind of relaxing.
Nice, yeah, limiting attention to one thing, especially one thing that's not that active, is a great meditation.
Yeah, it was sort of like a resource in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the physical sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with resources. It can be a lot of different things. But how cool that you found resource in the mind. I mean, that's really wonderful. And now you know that that's available to you, you know.
Yeah, I always focus on the other ones because the other ones are the ones that are always popping out at me.
Uh-huh.
So I better focus on those.
Did you have any moments of recognizing a little bit of auditory thinking coming up, or was it really?
Yeah. It's not totally silent.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just not as much as or it's easier to note it and in a small way. What am I saying? The feeling and whenever I start noting that,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it becomes it can spiral because it's those they become more pronounced maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So a suggestion of something to play around with, since you enjoyed that, because really you were working with like a restful state of the mind. You can do the same thing with the body and with image as well. It probably might be a little harder, but you can do it. So with emotion, if you're focusing on the body and you're noticing emotional sensations, you would just turn your attention to where you don't feel emotion. And you would just consider that to be peace. So even if there's a bunch of emotion happening in the body, there are going to be some areas where there's not emotion, right? Like even in your emotional centers, right? Like even in the face, throat, chest, and stomach, probably not the whole thing isn't lit up with emotion. And so you can draw your attention to where there's emotional peace and just rest your attention there and hang out with that and just keep coming back to that. And you might find a similar kind of experience that you did with the mind. It'll be a little probably harder to find at first since it's more active. But it's another way to resource. And then with visuals, you can also, even if there are a bunch of visuals, you can do your best to contact the space from which those visuals arise and the space into which they pass. The sort of void where they're coming and going from and to, and sort of the space around the images or behind the images. And that can be a really relaxing and pleasurable and sometimes really enlightening way to work. So play around with it. Let me know if you have any questions that come up. Anything else?
Yeah, I also do not have a limit of auditory thoughts coming in trains of thought. I mean, often it's in a very classically absent-minded way as well, where like my body's here, but like I'm trailing somewhere else, invested in a plan or a possibility, or just turning something over that I've been reading. And it was funny, as you were introducing the technique and the meditation, I've been meditating off and on for a while, but mostly off, but in the last 4 months or so, more regularly. And in the midst of that practice, I also been reading a bit of modern Buddhist writers and struggling with the notion of no self and sort of trying to get to a state where I'm just this level of conscious attention that's seeing, as you mentioned, actually in the meditation, your thoughts arise and pass away, and nothing really abiding other than the attention, no substantial thing. And I never really get to the state where I feel that, but what I did come across is really, as thoughts would arise, not feeling any self in there arising, like they just jump in, and then the self kind of comes in when it starts to grapple with them and do something with them. And so then ironically, like I thought back to this feeling that I had as you were introducing the meditation, and so then as I was doing this meditation, I just kept on going back to this thought, and that's what I kept on sort of fixating on, was the kind of meta thought. But then I just laid back and took the practice to that as well. Watch that thought come in and let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what a lot of my experience was like.
Excellent. Great report. Yeah. Yeah, really good how you were able to, recognize that, oh, that too. That's also some of that mental talk. So do you want to do a quick little no self exercise?
Sure.
Just for fun. We can all do it together and then we'll wrap it up. So close your eyes. Put your attention on whatever the most obvious sensation that you have. Something that's just an obvious sensation, easy to focus on. Maybe your butt on the cushion. Something somewhat static, so maybe not the breath. Something that feels, somewhat as permanent as it can be, somewhat solid. And put your attention on that. So right now you are meditating on this sensation. You are aware of this sensation. So now I want you to become aware of that awareness. Become aware that you're aware. And then naturally you can step backwards again, becoming aware that you're aware of being aware. And each time you land, you're once again in this kind of meditator self. And you can step behind that meditator self into another one. But this can go on forever. Becoming aware of awareness, becoming aware of awareness of awareness. Nowhere to land. And this can start to drop you into this state of pure awareness. And anytime a little self pops up with a thought, with a feeling, with an idea, you can start to recognize it's completely impermanent. Might seem real, might seem like you, but then it's gone. And here's another one. And then just drawing attention back to a simple sensation in the body, something grounding, maybe your butt, your feet, your thighs. And just arriving here now, right here in this body, in this moment, grounded. Blinking the eyes open, coming back to the room. So just playing around. Anybody? It was a very quick little dive.
That was neat.
Yeah. Yeah, expound if you so wish.
It's I liked the rapidity of it, of just going from having this very specific experience to realizing that there was a lot of other kind of arbitrary stuff tied in with that I hadn't been aware of previously, and then realizing there was someone who was perceiving that, and then going out into and seeing all of the threads from a distance and realizing that there was someone doing that.
Right.
Just kind of going out very quickly. It's sort of felt like when you get an optical illusion the first time.
Yes.
I never got those stupid magic eye things, but it's how I imagine people felt when they saw one of those.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's great. How was that for you? And I'm not expecting you to give me that same report, but I'm curious as to what that experience was like for you.
I mean, it was good. It was kind of, experientially being guided through something that I guess I think about a lot in a more detached way. So.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was hoping, because when we get into these texts and, whether it's ancient or modern and whether it's Buddhist or Hindu or anything else, right? It's very helpful. It's very helpful to read this stuff or listen to this stuff, but having the experience is something else. And that's really what all of it's pointing to anyway, is to have the experience. And so play around, since you've got a sharp intellect, you have you're an intelligent guy and your mind is very active. See if you can drop into experiential exploration a little bit more. I think that you might be surprised at what's available to you that maybe you feel like is like not attainable, that really it is. One of the things about some of the teachings that we come across is that there can be this sort of attitude of, with some of them, this attitude of this is something that might happen many lifetimes from now. But really, there's all kinds of awakenings, and there's obviously the traditional sort of classic big ahas, but we can, through practices and through specific practices, sort of create the environment to start to have tastes of these experiences. And it doesn't necessarily require many lifetimes to have a really different experience of being human, to really get on that path of awakening, and to really start to have big and small awakenings. So read the stuff, but also remember, like, 3 times a charm, the Buddha says, be a lamp unto yourself. You're your own best teacher, and any teaching, including anything that I say or Chris says, this is all just like suggestions and pointers and like invitations, but it's a wilderness, and really we're all in that wilderness on our own, which is scary but also really wonderful. So take the adventure. All right, so a few quick announcements. One, here Wednesday nights at 7:30 is Chris's class, for anyone who wants to check that out. I live stream. Chris does not live stream, but if you can't come in person and you want to join join the class online, you can do that on Facebook on my personal page. There's a donation box by the door, and links on the description for the video, and give what you can. If you can give more, give more. If you need to give less, give less. If you want to swipe a card or do an online payment, I have all those options. There's some tea and some cookies. If anyone wants to hang out and chat with each other and have some tea and cookies, you're welcome to hang out for a bit and do so. And I think that's all for now. Let's just seal off our time. We'll go ahead and just close your eyes. We're just going to be here for just a moment. And I just want everybody to find that sense of resource in the body. Or if you want to find it elsewhere, you can find resource in whatever way you want to. And just hang with resource for just a moment. Okay, and when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much for being here. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.